It was just another routine day for most people, but for Emily, June 15th would mark the beginning of a chain of events that would turn her life upside down. The morning had started like any other. She woke up early, made her coffee, and got ready to take care of some important errands. One of the most pressing was a visit to the bank. A simple task that should have been routine. But as she stood in line at the counter, waiting her turn, she couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. Maybe it was the weather. It had been cloudy all week, a thick gray sky looming overhead, but there was something else too. A nervous energy she couldn't explain. She looked around the small bank branch. The low hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed above her head, and a few people sat quietly, tapping away on their phones. A couple of elderly women exchanged pleasantries by the magazine rack, their voices soft and familiar. Everything seemed normal. Until it was her turn. The woman at the counter barely glanced up as Emily approached. She offered a stiff smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, then motioned for Emily to hand over her documents. Emily did so with a practiced ease, though her hands trembled slightly. She had been here many times before. It was a simple transfer, nothing complicated. But the clerk's gaze flickered down to her paperwork, then up at Emily, her lips pressing into a tight line. Without a word, she scanned the documents and then returned them to Emily, her hands trembling slightly. "Sorry, ma'am," the clerk said, her voice colder than Emily had expected. "I'm afraid we can't process your request today." Emily frowned, confusion sweeping over her. "What do you mean?" "There's nothing wrong with the paperwork. It's all in order." The woman glanced down at her computer screen, her fingers typing something rapidly. Emily leaned in slightly, trying to catch a glimpse of what she was typing. But the clerk's eyes flicked up, and she gave Emily a look that clearly said, "Stay back." "I'm afraid I can't help you," she said, this time without the pretense of politeness. Her tone was sharp, dismissive. "Please speak to someone else." Emily blinked, her breath catching in her chest. The air around her suddenly felt thick, suffocating. "No, I don't think you understand. I've been a customer here for years. I've never had any issues before. What's going on?" The woman shook her head, her expression unchanging. "I don't know what to tell you. You need to leave now." Emily felt her face flush. She could feel the eyes of the other customers on her, the weight of their stares adding to the tension in the air. She didn't want to make a scene, but she couldn't understand what was happening. Why was she being denied service? It didn't make sense. There was nothing wrong with her account, nothing wrong with the transfer. "I'm not leaving until you explain why," Emily said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and confusion. "I can't help you," the clerk repeated, her voice flat. A sick feeling settled in the pit of Emily's stomach. This wasn't just a mistake. There was something going on here, something that didn't add up. She stepped back from the counter, her mind racing. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the bank, her heart pounding in her chest. As soon as she stepped outside into the muggy air, she pulled out her phone, trying to calm her nerves. She had to get in touch with Mark. Mark. Her husband. He would know what to do. Her thumb hovered over the screen, and she quickly typed out a message. "I don't know what's going on, but they refuse to help me at the bank. They wouldn't tell me why. Call me when you can." She hit send, then stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do next. The world around her seemed to blur, her senses heightened in a way she had never experienced before. The hum of traffic, the chatter of passing pedestrians, the distant sound of a siren, everything felt distant. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The phone buzzed in her hand, breaking her thoughts. It was Mark. "Emily? Where are you? What's going on?" His voice sounded strained, like he already knew something was wrong. "I'm outside the bank." She began, but her words faltered. They just refuse to process my request. I don't understand why. There was a long pause before Mark spoke again, and when he did, his voice was tight, almost panicked. Get to the car. Now. Don't ask questions, just do it. I'll explain everything later. Her stomach dropped. Mark, what's going on? What are you talking about? Just get in the car, he insisted, the urgency in his tone making her heart race. Trust me, we need to leave. Now. The call ended abruptly, leaving Emily standing in the middle of the street, confused and shaken. Her phone slipped from her hand for a moment as her mind tried to process what had just happened. What did Mark mean? Why was he so upset? Why had he suddenly become so distant? She didn't have time to dwell on it. The panic in his voice was enough to send her into motion. She turned and rushed to her car, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. She could feel her breath coming in short gasps as she fumbled for her keys in her bag. The car started with a low hum, and Emily pulled out of the parking lot, her hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. The drive home felt like a blur. She couldn't focus. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. What had just happened at the bank? And why was Mark acting so strange? By the time she pulled into the driveway, she felt like she was on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall. The house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Her phone buzzed again. Mark. She didn't want to answer. She was too scared of what he would say next. But she had to. Her fingers trembled as she tapped the screen. Emily, are you home? Mark's voice came through, shaky but urgent. I'm here. But Mark, what's going on? She asked, her voice trembling with fear. She needed answers. Before he could respond, Emily saw a black SUV pull into their driveway. The engine growled as it came to a stop, and the door opened. Mark stepped out, but he wasn't alone. Two men in dark suits flanked him, their expressions serious and unreadable. The sudden image of them sent a jolt of fear through Emily. She didn't recognize them. Her breath caught in her throat as Mark's eyes met hers. He looked different. There was a tightness to his face, a sort of tension she had never seen before. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't the same man who had kissed her goodbye that morning. Emily, he began, his voice low. You need to know the truth. Everything is about to change. His words hit her like a freight train. The ground beneath her feet felt like it was shifting. What truth? What was he talking about? Her mind raced with questions, but before she could ask another, the men in suits stepped forward, their faces unreadable. Emily's heart raced as Mark stepped forward, his eyes distant, his usual warmth replaced by a cold, unsettling urgency. She felt a sharp pang in her chest, something wasn't right. The two men in dark suits moved behind him, their presence both intimidating and foreign. Emily stood frozen, unable to speak, as the world around her seemed to shrink into a tight, suffocating space. Mark finally spoke, his voice lower than usual, his tone tense. Emily, there's so much I need to tell you. But not here. We need to go inside. He glanced nervously over his shoulder at the men in suits. Emily's mind was racing, trying to process everything. She had never seen Mark like this. She had never seen him this serious, this distant. It was as if the man she had known for years had suddenly disappeared. The smile that usually danced in his eyes was gone, replaced by a coldness that unsettled her. What was going on? What had happened? Without waiting for her response, Mark turned and headed for the door, the two men following closely behind. Emily stood there, unsure, her mind still spinning from the events at the bank, and now this. She couldn't just follow them inside without knowing what was going on. She needed answers. Mark, she called out, but her voice was shaky. He didn't stop. Her heart sank. He was acting like he didn't even hear her. This wasn't the Mark she knew. Taking a deep breath, Emily forced herself to move, following him into the house. The air inside felt thick, the silence almost suffocating. The men in suits stood in the doorway, their eyes scanning the room like they were on high alert. Emily felt the weight of their gaze, the chill in their presence. It was like they were waiting for something, but what? What were they here for? And why did Mark bring them to their home? She stepped into the living room, her mind still reeling. Mark was already sitting on the couch, his elbows resting on his knees, his head down. It was as though he was bracing for something, but Emily had no idea what. She stood there for a moment, staring at him, desperate for him to say something, anything, to explain what was happening. "Mark," she said again, her voice quieter now, filled with more uncertainty. "Please, talk to me. What is going on? Why did they refuse me at the bank? Why are these men here?" He finally looked up at her, his face pale, his eyes filled with a storm of emotions. But there was something else there, something she had never seen before. A deep sadness. Guilt. Fear. And then, the words came. "Emily, I didn't want you to find out this way. But I have no choice. I never wanted to keep secrets from you. But I had no idea it would come to this." His words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Emily's stomach twisted in knots. Secrets? What was he talking about? "Mark," she whispered, her voice shaking, "what are you saying? What do you mean?" He closed his eyes briefly, then exhaled slowly, as if preparing himself for something difficult. "The truth is, Emily, the man you thought was your husband, isn't really me. Or at least, I'm not the man you think I am. And I'm so sorry that I've kept this from you for so long." Emily's mind went blank. She couldn't process what he had just said. It felt like the world was slipping away from her. Was this a joke? A terrible joke? She searched his face for any sign of humor, but there was none. His expression was dead serious. "What are you talking about?" Her voice cracked as she spoke, barely above a whisper. "Please, sit down," Mark said, his voice softer now. "I'm going to explain everything. It's just, I don't even know where to start." Emily slowly lowered herself onto the couch, her hands trembling in her lap. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of his words. A part of her wanted to run, to escape from the nightmare that was unfolding before her. But she couldn't. She had to know the truth. Mark took a deep breath before speaking again. "It all started a long time ago, before we met. Before you knew who I was. I wasn't always Mark. I wasn't always the man you fell in love with." He paused, his eyes flicking to the two men standing in the doorway. One of them gave a slight nod, as if urging him on. "Who were you, then?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was part of something much bigger," Mark replied. "Something I can't explain in full just yet. But I need you to understand that everything I've done, everything we've built together, hasn't been a lie. But there are things I've kept hidden. Secrets. And now, those secrets are catching up with me. And with us." His words were like a puzzle, the pieces scattered, with no clear picture to follow. Emily shook her head, trying to make sense of it all. She couldn't grasp it. She needed him to explain. She needed him to make it clear. "Mark, please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "What are you talking about? Why does it feel like my entire life is falling apart right now?" The two men in suits exchanged a glance, and then one of them spoke for the first time. His voice was deep, authoritative. "Mark's right. There's a lot you don't know. And it's time you knew. We were hoping we could keep you out of this, but now it's too late." Emily's eyes widened as the man continued. There's a reason your husband is who he is. And it's not just because he's been living a quiet life. He's been living under an assumed identity. The man you think you know, isn't who you think he is. The words hit Emily like a ton of bricks. Her chest tightened, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin around her. She turned to Mark, her gaze full of disbelief. Mark, she whispered. What are they saying? Mark stood up, running his hands through his hair. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a man torn between fear and guilt. He took a few steps toward her, then stopped, as if afraid to get any closer. Emily, he said quietly, I didn't want you to find out this way. But you need to know the truth. I'm not just a businessman. I'm not just a regular guy. I've been part of something much bigger. I've been involved in operations that most people don't even know exist. Things that, he paused, as if struggling with the weight of the words. Things that are about to change everything. Emily stood up, shaking her head in disbelief. No, this can't be true. You've been lying to me all this time. I never meant to, Mark said softly, his voice filled with regret. But I didn't have a choice. If I had told you everything from the beginning, you would have been in danger. And I couldn't risk that. I love you too much. The weight of his words hit Emily like a wave, but she still couldn't wrap her mind around what was happening. Everything she knew about their life, everything she thought she understood, was unraveling before her eyes. You're telling me that none of this was real? She asked, her voice trembling with hurt and disbelief. Our life together? Our marriage? The person I thought I was married to? No, Mark answered quickly, shaking his head. Everything was real. The love we've shared, the life we've built together, it's all been real. But the truth is, I've been hiding parts of myself from you. Parts of my life that I thought would protect you. And now. He trailed off, his voice heavy with the weight of his unspoken words. Emily's mind was reeling. She could feel the ground beneath her feet beginning to shift, like the world she had known was no longer solid. What had happened to the man she had married? Was everything she thought she knew about him just a carefully constructed lie? The words Mark had just spoken echoed in Emily's mind, spinning around in a dizzying whirl of confusion and disbelief. Everything she thought she knew was shattering before her eyes. Her breath came in quick gasps as she struggled to absorb what he had just confessed. Could it really be true? Was the man she had married, the man she had trusted with her heart and her life, really someone else entirely? Emily's heart was in her throat. She wanted to scream, to shout, to demand the truth, but the weight of the situation crushed her voice. All she could do was stand there, frozen, as Mark, the man she thought she knew, stood before her with the eyes of two cold strangers watching from behind him. Mark, she whispered, her voice trembling. What exactly do you mean? Who are you really? Mark shifted uncomfortably, his hands trembling as he ran them through his hair. The men in suits stayed silent, watching the scene unfold like they were merely bystanders, yet the tension in the room was suffocating. I wish I could explain everything right now, Mark said, his voice heavy with regret. But I can't. Not all of it. Some things are just too dangerous to explain in one go. His words were fragmented, as if he was unsure how to say them. Emily felt as though the floor beneath her was disappearing, leaving her to freefall in a world she didn't recognize. She had always believed in the integrity of their relationship. She had always trusted him completely. But now, everything felt like a lie. Mark, I need answers, she insisted, her voice sharp. I don't care about your excuses. Tell me who you are. Tell me why you've been lying to me. He glanced at the two men who were still standing near the door. They had not moved since they arrived, but their presence was heavy, their eyes filled with an unspoken warning. Emily felt their eyes on her, like they were watching her every move, waiting for her to crack. "Please, Emily," Mark said, his voice pleading. "This isn't something we can talk about here. I need you to come with me. Away from all of this. It's the only way you'll understand." Emily's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Betrayal. Anger. Confusion. She wanted to lash out, to demand that he tell her everything right here and now, but something in his eyes made her hesitate. It wasn't just guilt or regret that she saw in him. It was fear. Fear for her safety. And for the first time since this whole ordeal began, Emily realized that the danger wasn't just his secret, it was hers, too. "Why are they here?" Emily asked, pointing to the two men. "Why are they following you? And what do you mean by dangerous? Are we in danger?" Mark hesitated. The look on his face was one she had never seen before, one of deep sorrow and concern. "Emily," he began, his voice faltering, "you've always known there was something different about me. I've always tried to protect you from the truth, but the truth is, I'm not who you think I am. And those men? They're here because they need to make sure you're safe. I don't want to drag you into this, but it's too late now. They're here because it's time you knew everything." Emily shook her head in disbelief. Her entire life had been turned upside down in the span of a few hours. Nothing made sense. Why had he kept this from her? Why hadn't he told her the truth long before? "What are you involved in, Mark?" she asked, her voice shaking with emotion. "Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me? All these years." He sighed deeply, his face a mask of regret. "It's not about trust, Emily. It's about keeping you safe. I couldn't put you in harm's way. I thought I could protect you by keeping this from you. But now," he paused, looking toward the men again. "Now it's too late. You're already involved." Emily's pulse quickened. "Involved in what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark stood silent for a moment, then he nodded to the men in suits. The one who had spoken before took a step forward. "Mark," the man said, his voice deep and authoritative, "perhaps it's time to tell her everything. The longer you wait, the more dangerous it becomes for her." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She turned to Mark, her eyes wide with panic. "What do you mean? What is going on?" Mark looked down at the floor, his hands clenched into fists. For a moment, he didn't speak, and Emily felt the weight of silence pressing down on her chest. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. "Emily, I'm not who I said I was. I'm not just a businessman. I've been working with intelligence agencies for years. I'm part of something much bigger than you could ever imagine. And the people who've been watching us, they've been tracking me for a long time." Emily stood frozen, her mind spinning as the full gravity of his words sank in. "What do you mean, intelligence agencies? What is this? I don't understand. Are you a spy?" Mark looked at her, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Not a spy. Not exactly. But yes, I've been working for an agency that deals with matters of national security. We've been working undercover to prevent international threats, but it's not something I could ever tell you. And now, because you've seen too much, you're at risk, too." Emily staggered back, her mind struggling to process the implications of what he had just said. She felt like she was losing her grip on reality. Was this a nightmare? Was this some sort of twisted joke? But the look on Mark's face, the pain, the fear, told her it was all too real. "But why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you lie to me? Why didn't you trust me enough to let me in?" Mark closed his eyes briefly, the weight of her words hitting him hard. "I didn't want to bring you into this world, Emily. It's a dangerous world. One where people get hurt. I wanted to give you a normal life. A life where you didn't have to worry about the things I deal with every day. But I deserve to know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I loved you. I still love you. You should have trusted me enough to share your burden. I know, Mark replied, his voice raw with emotion. I failed you. I failed us. The silence in the room was deafening. Emily felt a wave of sorrow and anger rise within her, but beneath that, there was also a flicker of something else, a deeper understanding of the man she had married. As much as she wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, she realized that the truth was far more complicated than she had ever imagined. Mark hadn't been lying out of malice. He had been protecting her. But now, the danger was no longer something he could shield her from. We need to get you out of here, the man in the suit said suddenly, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. It's not safe for either of you. Emily's stomach turned. What do you mean, not safe? What's going to happen to us? Mark turned to her, his face grim. There are people who would do anything to get to me. They're watching us right now. And if we don't leave, they will come for you. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She was caught in a web of lies, secrets, and danger, and she had no idea who to trust. She wanted to scream, to run, to escape from the nightmare she had found herself in, but there was nowhere to hide. She was already in too deep. Mark reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. Emily, I swear to you, I will protect you. I don't want to lose you. Please, just trust me for once. We have to leave. Now. She looked into his eyes, seeing the desperation there. The man she had married, the man she had loved, was now someone she didn't fully recognize. But there was something still there, something she couldn't quite place, an unwavering love. Despite everything that had happened, Emily found herself nodding. Okay, she whispered. I trust you. Emily's heart raced in her chest as she stood there, gripping Mark's hand. It felt like the entire world was collapsing around her. The man she had married, the man she had believed in, was no longer just the quiet businessman who came home every night. He was someone entirely different. Someone dangerous. And now, he was asking her to trust him again, to follow him into the unknown. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air. She didn't know whether she was ready to fully embrace the truth of his double life. But the gravity of the situation was undeniable. If she didn't follow him now, if she didn't leave with him, she might never get another chance to understand the real story, the story that was far darker than anything she could have imagined. The two men in suits remained quiet, their cold eyes watching every move. One of them stepped forward again, breaking the silence. We don't have much time, the man said, his voice low and urgent. The moment you stepped into this room, everything changed. You're no longer safe here. We need to move quickly. Emily glanced between Mark and the men, her mind still reeling from the shock of his confession. Every part of her screamed for answers, for clarity. But the look in Mark's eyes, the one that pleaded with her to trust him, was all she had to go on. Where are we going? She asked, her voice shaky but determined. Mark squeezed her hand gently. We're going to a safe house. It's the only place I can guarantee your safety. Emily's mind buzzed with questions. How could she possibly feel safe in a place she didn't even know? She had been living her life, unaware of the dangers lurking just beneath the surface. Now, everything was a threat. Everything was a potential danger. Her life had been ripped apart in an instant, and all she wanted was to make sense of it. But the more she learned, the more the world around her seemed to slip away. The men in suits moved toward the door, indicating for Emily and Mark to follow. With one last glance at the life she once knew, Emily stepped into the unknown, her footsteps echoing as they made their way down a narrow hallway. I'm sorry you had to find out like this, Mark said quietly as they walked. I never wanted to put you in harm's way. I thought I could keep you safe by keeping the truth from you. She didn't know how to respond. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, confusion, but there was also a part of her that felt a strange sense of compassion for him. This man, who had lied to her, had also been living in constant fear, always looking over his shoulder, always hiding the truth from the one person who mattered most. They reached the door at the end of the hall, and Mark pushed it open. A dark, narrow staircase led downward. As they descended, the air grew cooler, and the walls seemed to close in on them. Emily could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The closer they got to the basement level, the more she realized that her life would never be the same again. This wasn't just a man with secrets anymore. This was a man who had been living a life she couldn't even begin to comprehend. At the bottom of the stairs, a door opened into a small, windowless room. The walls were bare, save for a few shelves lined with books and files. A table in the center was stacked high with papers and monitors, and the dim light from a single bulb cast long shadows across the room. "This is where it all happens," Mark said, his voice tinged with sorrow. "This is where the real work begins. Where I work to protect not just you, but the entire country. We've been dealing with threats for years, Emily, and I've kept you in the dark because I thought you would be safer that way." Emily looked around the room, taking in the cold, sterile environment. It was a far cry from the cozy apartment they had shared, with its warm lights and familiar comforts. This place felt like a hidden world, one that existed entirely apart from the life she had known. "But why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why me? Why bring me into this now?" Mark sighed and sat down at the table, running a hand through his hair. "Because, Emily, I've failed. I've kept you in the dark for so long, but now you know too much. And there are people who will stop at nothing to make sure the truth stays buried. They won't care who they hurt to keep it that way." The weight of his words hit her like a punch to the gut. "Who are these people?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What's going on, Mark? What did you get yourself into?" Mark looked at her, his eyes haunted by the knowledge of the danger they were in. "They're part of an international organization. I've been working to stop them for years. They've been operating in the shadows, manipulating events, pulling the strings behind the scenes. And now they've found out about you. They know about us." Emily's head spun. She couldn't even begin to process what he was telling her. It felt like something out of a spy thriller, something she would never have imagined in her wildest dreams. And yet, here she was, trapped in the middle of it. "What do they want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They want everything," Mark said, his voice grim. "They want control. They want power. And they'll do anything to get it. They don't care who they have to destroy in the process. That's why I've been working with the agency, to stop them before they can cause any more damage." Emily's mind reeled. She had always thought of Mark as just an ordinary man, someone who went to work every day, someone who lived a quiet life. But now, everything she knew about him seemed like a lie. The man she had trusted with her life was a stranger, someone who had been keeping the world, and the danger, hidden from her. "You said you failed," she said quietly. "What do you mean by that?" Mark's face darkened, and he leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "I should have told you sooner. I should have been honest with you from the beginning. But I didn't. And now, because of that, we're both in danger. They know about you, Emily. And they won't stop until they get what they want." A chill ran down Emily's spine. She could feel the weight of the threat hanging over them like a dark cloud. But there was something else, too, something deeper. She realized that the danger they were in wasn't just external. It was also internal, between her and Mark. He had kept her in the dark for so long, and now she was left to pick up the pieces of her broken trust. "How do we get out of this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark looked up at her, his eyes filled with determination. "We fight. Together. We fight to protect the truth. We fight to protect the people we love. And we fight to make sure that the people who want to hurt us don't win. Emily took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling over her. She didn't know how to fight this battle. She didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in days, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could make it through this. Maybe they could survive this nightmare and come out the other side. But the road ahead would not be easy. The danger was real, and the stakes were higher than ever. Emily and Mark would have to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. They would have to confront the lies, the secrets, and the shadows that had hung over their lives for so long. And when the dust finally settled, they would have to rebuild, not just their relationship, but their very sense of who they were. The last words Mark spoke before the room fell into an uneasy silence were the ones that would haunt Emily for the rest of her life. We can't go back, Emily. There's no going back from this.